Hola a todos, soy Patricia, uso los pronombres ella, ellas y voy a interpretar junto con mi colega Catalina. Somos parte del colectivo Babilla, un colectivo de justicia del lenguaje decolonial y antirracista, y vamos a interpretar en lenguaje inclusivo. Voy a compartir las instrucciones de cómo usar la función de interpretación por Zoom en español y en inglés. Hi everyone, I'm Patricia. I use she, them pronouns. I will be interpreting with my colleague Catalina. We are part of Babilla Collective, a decolonial anti-racist language justice collective, and we will be interpreting in inclusive language. I'm going to share the instructions on how to use the Zoom interpretation feature in Spanish and in English. Este evento ofrece interpretación simultánea. Para acceder a los canales de idioma, vaya al icono del globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla de computadora o haga clic en más si se está conectando por una tablet o teléfono. Si desea escuchar en español, haga clic en el icono y elige el canal de español. Puede cambiar de idioma en cualquier momento al hacer clic nuevamente en el icono. Para escuchar solo la voz de la intérprete, haga clic en silenciar audio original. Y si necesita ayuda con la interpretación, no duden en informarnos por el chat. Simultaneous interpretation is available in English and Spanish. To access the language channel, go to the globe icon at the bottom of your computer screen or click More if you are on a tablet or phone. If you wish to listen in English, click on the icon and choose the English channel. You can switch between languages at any time by clicking the icon again. To hear only the voice of the interpreter, click Mute Original Audio. If you need interpretation or help troubleshooting, please message us via the chat box. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Patricia. Next slide, please. Welcome. My name is Michelle Ruiz. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I am the program coordinator at the US Latinx Art Forum. Before we begin this event, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and honor our ancestral grounds on which I reside in support of Indigenous peoples' ongoing stewardship and struggles to protect their cultural resources and homelands. I'm currently broadcasting from my home in Berwyn, which is on the traditional unceded territory, of the Council of Three Fires, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi tribes. Next slide, please. Since 2016, the US Latinx Art Forum has supported equity in the art world by championing artists and arts professionals dedicated to Latinx art. In 2021, we partnered with Mellon Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the New York Foundation for the Arts to administer the Latinx Artist Fellowship. This fellowship is designed to address the systemic and long-standing lack of philanthropic and institutional support for Latinx artists by awarding $50,000 in unrestricted funds to each member of a multi-generational cohort of 15 artists each year for an initial commitment of 5 years. This is the first significant prize of its kind and celebrates the plurality and diversity of Latinx artists and aesthetics. We are honored to be a partner for this groundbreaking initiative. It is my pleasure to welcome you to X as Intersection, the present moment. Today's event marks the second installation of the 2022 and 2023 X as Intersection series, which brings our second cohort of fellows into conversation with curators who share a sustained commitment to Latinx art. We plan to close our events with a Q&A and invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A function below. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our co-moderators for this conversation: Sylvia Orozco, co-founder and executive director of Mexic-Arte Museum based in Austin, Texas, and Cesáreo Moreno, Visual Arts Director and Chief Curator of the National Museum of Mexican Art based in Chicago, Illinois.
Thank you, Michelle. Latinx artists are the multidisciplinary voices of our communities. Their creative practices express our disparities, desires, and diligence. The way that their work records and responds to this moment offers poignant signposts for tomorrow. These artists' works are examples of the reality and challenges of today within our communities. As another difficult year in a divided country comes to a close, it is often the artists that offer the most perceptive understanding of the present moment.
Sorry about that. Let's try that one more time with the mute off. During this event, the artists will discuss what they see from within their communities as they generate work that confronts these circumstances. All utilizing different media, these artists create artwork that spans the country while referencing urgent situations encountered in the world around them. The diversity among the second cohort of fellows is extensive as the different locations where they live and where they work. Their perspectives from distinct places of the country will provide us with a wide-ranging panorama of our Latinx communities, their inquiries, and their labor. The subjects raised in conversation will be key points of entry toward understanding and perhaps even resolutions. They are an ongoing dialogue among a group of forward-looking artists with distinct voices. And now I'd like to pose a question, a general open question to the four artists tonight to think about as we continue. As forward-looking artists who perceive and observe the United States from distinct locations, how do you respond to the present moment in your world? What questions are you asking of yourself and your neighbors? As a point of entry into national conversations, how does humanity factor into your points of contention, into your understanding of the other? Next slide, please. Tonight's evening, we start with Maria Gaspar, an interdisciplinary artist whose practice addresses issues of spatial justice to amplify, mediate, or divert structures of power through individual and collective gestures. Maria, your 10-year-long incarceration project within your community of La Villita has developed and expanded along with the community inside and outside the walls of Cook County Jail. Please tell us your thoughts on some of the creative aspects, how your work moves through these walls of incarceration and communicates to viewers a new and different understanding of the prison system and perhaps abolition.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this very rich conversation. And thank you, Cesáreo, for your question. I'm going to attempt to answer your provocation through just a couple of slides. I have a short time to present, and I chose a couple of images to share today. And we can go to the next slide. So as Cesáreo mentioned, my work addresses issues of spatial justice to amplify, mobilize, or divert structures of power through individual and collective gestures. I use sculpture, installation, sound, and community-based processes in my work, and I'm interested in how to examine the body as a kind of compass, especially in relationship to an environment or an atmosphere filled with political and social and cultural issues. And I thought I'd start with this, beautiful quote by Bell Hooks from her book, All About Love, New Visions, where she says, "The love we make in community stays with us wherever we go. With this knowledge as our guide, we make any place we go a place where we return to love." And much of the basis of my body of work really begins with this foundational moment for me, the articulation of love and tenderness that is enacted through the process of kinship when you're working with people, especially people within very marginalized spaces like prisons and jails. And not all of my practice takes place in prisons and jails, but I'll focus predominantly on that aspect for this presentation. And I've been working at the Cook County Department of Corrections for now over a decade. And I think about the Cook County Jail as a space that is both seen and unseen, a space that is visibilized, but also invisibilized, a carceral space that has existed within my neighborhood since the early 1920s, that takes up 96 acres of size within a predominantly Mexican community of 80,000 residents. 96 acres of carceral space, which is the equivalent to about 74 American football fields. And the population itself of the jail, the detainees who are awaiting trial, who have not been charged, are sometimes upwards of 15,000 detainees at any given time. So through various projects, I've been working to transgress the borders that divide communities between those who are incarcerated or system impacted and the families that miss them, that yearn for them, or people who have been harmed. And I've been thinking a lot about the ways that we can make divisions porous, the way that spaces can generate moments to thrive, or where we can create collective meaning making or even radical aesthetic experiences through various kinds of actions. So I wanted to start with this project that is probably one of my most favorite ones, that was part of a project from 2015 called Not Just Another Day. And this project was one of almost a dozen projects that was generated through a multi-year independent arts project called 96 Acres Project. And 96 Acres Project that ran from 2012 to 2016 through 8 site responsive projects, engaged many kinds of people, from artists to activists, from local aldermen to violence prevention workers. And the goal of the project was to talk about the impact of mass incarceration through public, site-specific artist interventions. And all of them took place either at and around the carceral facility. This such project is an art intervention that was collaborated with the Yellow Valley Arts Reach, which is a youth arts organization located in the same neighborhood here that I grew up in, called La Villita. And what the young people proposed for this project was to do a series of text interventions where they would use stencils and power washing to create text at the perimeter, on the sidewalk and the wall of the jail. And some of the text or questions that they posed were things like, what's your role? And that was a really great provocation, because I think that it implicated not just people who were maybe going to work at the jail, like the guards or various people that work for the sheriff's department, but also everybody else that, moved around this space. And really it asked for all of us to think about our own complicity within a system of oppression and how we might be able to change or transform the way that we deal with harm. And another really major point to this project was that a lot of the young people that participated were not only talking about the larger issue of mass incarceration, but also they were thinking about the ways in which jails and prisons are highly racialized, the ways that poverty or lack of economic stability have created a disproportionately racialized prison system. As you might know, we incarcerate more people than anybody else in the world, about 2.5 million people, and the majority are Black and Brown people and other marginalized groups. And their intervention included wearing these Tyvek suits that then became a kind of performance, and the text itself over time disappeared. And that ephemerality, or that durational aspect, or the time-based aspect, was a really important moment for us to kind of think about our own relationship to carceral space, and the way we think about it or don't think about it on an everyday basis. Next slide. A few years later, another project that I was involved in is called Radioactive Stories from Beyond the Wall. And this was a project where myself and my collaborator, Michael de Anda Muniz, led workshops inside of 2 divisions of the Cook County Jail for a set of months. And we produced audio and visual material that was then broadcast onto the jail wall itself, but also through live radio. And what we did is we worked with a group of detainees who all self-selected to be part of this project. And over the duration of several months for each group, we focused on the ways that the physical aspects of incarceration, or what Nicole Fleetwood calls penal matter, can be personified into different kinds of narratives, where they can talk about their own personal experience, or even fictionalized stories about material like the Department of Corrections uniform, or the kinds of writings or ephemera that are left within various divisions and tiers. And so all of that was then taken and worked with sound engineers and video production folks to then produce a final public event. Next slide. And I'll start wrapping up, but this is a current project I'm working on called, this one is called Clamor, where I've been documenting, and you can play the video, where I've been documenting the demolition of the oldest part of the jail called Division 1. And this part of the jail was built in the early 1920s. And really, I'm thinking so much about what it means to imagine abolition, to imagine the disappearance or takedown of prisons and jails, and the ways that we might start to imagine that through watching or marking the demolition. And touch and presence become a big part of it, because I've been also collecting some of the penal matter, including the bars and the jail bricks, and thinking really about how to turn that material, how to transform the material that represents violence, or the material that represents confinement, and transforming it into material that might even we might think of as liberatory, or might sort of free the material from its original context. So I'm sort of in that process right now of thinking about how to do that. And I'll end there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Maria. The next artist this evening is Consuelo Jimenez Underwood. She is a contemporary fiber artist whose work ranges from delicate miniature tapestries to monumental fibers and mixed media installations, juxtaposing the natural beauty and ecological destruction along the US-Mexico border. Consuelo. Hello.
Hi.
You've been working with fibers and textiles for 40 years now, weaving in migrant and border stories, both personal and ancestral, trials of resistance. What timeless issues do you recognize in the present moment? And whether consciously or not, you highlight them in your current work.
Thank you, Cesáreo. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me. And can I start with the first slide, please? Let's begin with the land, with spirit, and the two nations from across the oceans, Spain and England. I start there because as I was picking and harvesting crops throughout California, where I grew up, ground zero, I was also involved in having to help my father cross the border without documentation. I swore when I was like 6'5", when I grow up, I'm going to say something. The border has not come down. The land is still here, and the two nations that occupy this land are still here. And in this slide, in my work, I try to remind people, it's not the flags, it's the earth, it's the land. And that's what we have to focus on. What I'd like to do with my work now in this present moment is what Rodney King asked 20 years ago. Can we just get along? Can we just merge these two ideas of nation into the third nation, that is United States of America? Next slide. I like to speak about the border. It's, when are you going to stop talking about the border, Consuelo? They keep asking me. I'm never, when they take it down. I love Maria's slide of taking down the prison. Can we do the same with the wall? And in this work, it's even, the first 20 years of my art work, well, the first challenge was, can you accept a thread, the woman's decorative art form, craft work as art? And that was in the late 70s, early 80s, when I put down the paintbrush and I picked up the needle and thread, and I said, I will use forever an hilo, a thread, a needle to make my statements, because I want to talk about all those anonymous women that made all this incredible work unrecognized. Congruently with the content was the idea of, how do I take down this wall with the needle and thread? How do I make people recognize this wall with a needle and thread? And as beautiful as possible, because I am amazed, and I want to make those anonymous ladies that went down in time making this incredible, beautiful work. I want to honor that hand. I want to honor their beauty, but I also want to talk about the pain that our man-made walls have built on our land. And this is an example. Since I used the caution sign the first 10 years, the running family, that didn't work. I was appalled when they put up that sign and they put up the border. They put up the border when they were celebrating taking down the Berlin Wall. That same year, Reagan started making a wall here, and it went totally unnoticed. So this is an image of the undocumented Texas blackbird, that for some reason, there's a flock, a little group will come down and crash right into the wall. Instant death upon touching that wall. They come at it at full force. And I'm emotionally struck when I think of that. When I think of all the, if we don't care about people, do we care about the land? If we don't take that wall down, we will have in 7 generations a Sahara Desert on our continent. That's my, does anybody care about that? Do we really need a Sahara Desert in one of the most beautiful deserts that still barely is existing on our continent? The next slide. So what am I doing at this present moment? I'm still trying to unite the Mexican and the idea of Spain and England together. For example, on the right, I'm making this image of the US flag, and next to it is the image of the Mexican flag, which is not in the slide. In the middle image, I'm putting together Coatlicue. I'm going to force that image onto that US flag, and you can see on the left side the eye of Coatlicue. So I'm still trying. Can we get along? Can we merge into one nation, really, under Coatlicue? That is my intent. I think at the present moment, it's extremely necessary to recognize who we are and what we're doing here and by whose laws. And the laws are given to us by our nation. And in this case, we live in the United States. I live in Ground Zero, California, which is blue, but in reality, it's purple. The Central Valley is incredibly red. The coast is incredibly blue, and I'm in the middle. And we all are suffering for this, irrational fascination with our border, with the land between Mexico and the US. And my work is trying to just get along. We're here all together. Coatlicue is never going to go away. I know my generations coming forth will always use the tortilla and the molcajete. I know that. Does everybody else know that? I don't think they know that. But it is here. I feel like we're the real plants, and everybody who comes to the borderlands and to this area, they're potted. They don't really understand that it's one land, and it's not two flags. It's really one flag. And what's the flag? Needle and thread, arte, the ecosystem, the land, the water, the earth. It's one land. We're here as artists, me especially, that's my focus, is to just make people aware of the present moment and how we can still help. If we take that wall down like Maria took down that prison, we will regain our desert back as one of the most beautiful deserts in the world. But as far as I know, when you build the wall 1 mile each direction, everything dies. Nothing grows. Animals don't grow. In time, it's going to be a huge desert. This is I feel like the Chicken Little, it's the end of the world, and it will be for a lot of people, land, critters. It's the end, but we can stop it. And it's not, what is end? It's a change. And that's what I think ultimately I want the viewer to see when they see my work. The change is always there. It's always going to be there. We have to accommodate it or live with it, like the water, like the Taoist said, not doing, be like the water. So I guess in my final cry to the masses, because in reality, I really would be learning, I would be wanting to learn. I want to make beautiful shawls, beautiful blankets. I want to weave them so badly, but I feel like I can't. I'm possessed with this issue of we have to get along. We have to recognize who we are as a nation, as one person, as one humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Consuelo.
Thank you, Consuelo, and thank you, Cesáreo. Now we're going to see and hear from the artist from Las Nietas de Nonó. The Afro-diasporic siblings, Mulowayi and Mapensi, are Las Nietas de Nonó. In their creative process, they evoke ancestral memory through personal archives. Their practice incorporates performance, found objects, organic materials, ecology, fiction, video, and installation to address environmental and racial injustice. The question that we're posing is how does your work expand and increase the awareness of these injustices, not only in your community, but also on a global front in the present moment?
Gracias, Silvia. Durante este año hemos reconfigurado algunas prácticas.
During this year, we have reconfigured some projects that began in Puerto Rico, specifically in Loíza and San Antonio, where we created encounters to connect with memories linked to food. And this project expanded this year to London and Rome. In Rome, we did this event where we summoned Black people, Afro-descendant people, Afro-Latin people, Afro-Italians, Black Italians, who were interested in food and sharing. And what was intended was that people bring dishes and we talk about the plants, about healing, about ancestors, and a way to reconnect with these ancestral technologies, passing on knowledge legacies, and above all, to celebrate us. This is the space of joy, Afro Hayera. We also passed around a red notebook where the people wrote about some memory that they have about food, thoughts, feeling. That red notebook travels with us and is taken to each event where these spaces of collective healing take place. In the future, there will be a book or a notebook written by people as a way to recover these stories. And to us, it's interesting to us to connect with these histories. And we did research for 5 months about how, with the Rome Prize, it was 6 months of research about how food transited during the terrible colonization. And much of that research resulted in a short film that was shown in New York as part of a series. And for example, we were talking about the ways of distributing and conserving food and African technologies. That wisdom we took with us. And so it is a reflection about conservation that currently exists in Italy. And it also happens in the US and Puerto Rico. It's a global problem. There's only one planet, and we have to get rid of the idea that environmental racism that I experienced in San Antonio in my neighborhood has nothing to do with the political practices of other regions. The next slide, please. I want to connect your question with the work we're doing more currently. We created scenographic installations with found objects, organic materials, and ancient technologies. And we did 3 stages. And each stage we activated a little over 2 weeks ago with a theatrical composition. And so each scenario was announced by the touch of a snail and followed by the whistle of that ocarina. And then we had a recipe. Our master cook, Aracelis de Loisa, and is also a collaborator and a very, very good friend committed to seeds and plants. So the photo that you're looking at the right is the installation. The page we were looking for is not found, which speaks of failed systems, the exploitation of resources, and it's a symbolic transgression of all the bureaucracy and violence that Black and impoverished communities deal with in Puerto Rico. It's a cynical piece because it intends to be perceived for its beauty. It invites you to contemplate its harmonious part with each of its elements, but at the same time, it is beast-like and seeks to trap you in a dimension of bureaucratic nonsense. The security screens have strange videos, worked in a rather confusing editing that made us doubt what we were seeing. At the first monitor, it has unmoving fish in an aquarium. Number 2, a house that was swept to the seashore by Hurricane Maria. And the third one, the moment of implosion of a public housing project that was home to hundreds of families in Carolina. For the performance, the page you're looking for is not found. We work with the alter ego archetype of a secretary who arrives at the offices as if she has just left the carnival. And the carnival is like a party in the street. The symbol of the street and what the street means to everyone as a space for struggle and protest is part of it. The exploration to create this performance, we had this slogan of entering the street, entering the office from the street. So we looked for those street sounds that resonated with us. And during the performance, with the entrance of the secretariat or secretary to the offices, there's a sound of a car accelerating. And in another moment, there's a merengue sound. The secretary has the quality of like a medium transmuting into several characters who pass through these offices every day with their stories and their burdens. I'm interested in this alter ego, which is inspired by my mother, who was a secretary, and by the power conferred on the secretaries of the world. The secretary is the one who connects and is in between the world of authority and processes and procedures. So reflecting on this work, after presenting the performances in New York, I see it as a work in progress that needs to mature more because there are so many elements, materials, and ideas which Mapenzi and I would like to continue exploring. And then part of our practice is exploring and so the installation or scene on the left is the creation of a space to contemplate and listen to the sounds of nature with a public telephone and see yourself from a platform that simulates a pond. The installation is a large container of sound organisms, of these sounds of an absent landscape. Where I live, the sound of machines, of industries are competing with the sounds of the birds in the courtyard of the house. And that tension that exists in the soundscape of the neighborhood was partly translated into this installation. To me, this piece generates a lot of nostalgia and emptiness. And in one of the logs, you can sit and put your headphones and listen to the sound of the landscape forest inside. And then for the performance of Species Archive, we explored the movements of NPCs, the non-player character, and it's a term from video games. It's a character that's not playing, it enters the video game without being controlled by the gamer. And we work on this idea to make a comment to the perception of reality, questioning virtuality in that sense, its functionality. If in any future of virtual landscapes, we want to know what that means. And we've always been interested in inserting comments from the video game and talking about different technologies from the ancestral to the present. In the neighborhood, the landscapes change abruptly. One day you see a plot with its house and banana plantations, and the next day the house is destroyed because the Gomera trade is going to expand. The next slide, please. The third installation is Sala Portal, and it's a piece that has been transforming. It's a metamorphosis of an installation we did in 2021 in the Hammer Museum, which was then called No More Tears. And this installation performance is a room-like space with the intention of healing for our cousins, Fernando y Joel, who had recently been released from prison at that time. In a conversation we had with my cousin Fernando, he told us that for him, the moment of entering the prison every afternoon after the job he had while he was admitted to the institution meant for him to transform himself in order to survive inside. In his story, he describes the frame of the door through which he entered the institution was the point of transformation. After those conversations, we were resonating with what he told us, thinking about the dimensions and portals. And we had already been working with the concept of the room for other pieces. So there arose to this room a symbolic reversal of that image of that Fernando had. We wanted to transform it into a space of healing and ask for the intervention of the divine. And in that performance, we handled some symbology such as file and masks. And this response is a response to the idea and has the intention that every time this ritual was generated, where that case, that file, we send healing to our cousins. And we collaborate with a group of women, extraordinary women, and we have organized and founded Parcelas Afro-Caribeñas. And we have contributed to the creation of collective spaces for healing and care through the community dining room, where daily food is served in complementary health spaces such as acupuncture, as well as the programming of free art workshops for members of the community. These are also portals, possible scenarios of healing and self-care that have been created collectively.
Gracias. The next artist is Vincent Valdez. Vincent Valdez is a visual artist whose drawn and painted subjects remark on a universal struggle within various socio-political arenas and eras. About one of your works, you said once, the work is The Beginning is Near, Part 2, Dream Baby Dream, that you did in 2018, you commented, the work reminds me on a daily basis that we are bound by similar patterns of history, experiences, and struggles for survival. Filtering the present through the past presents me with a difficult and private examination of my own tangled history as a Mexican American in 21st century America. I don't presume that painting can change the world, but I stand firm in my belief that the artist can still provide critical moments of silence and clarity in times of immense distortion and chaos. Can you further expand on this? And does this continue to be true for you today?
Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. In response to your question, I think that it is fair to say that an idea about my artistic intentions, both inside and outside of the studio, ring truer than ever. It has always been my quest to present this work as a testimony, to testify about what I witness in the world around me. But I think more importantly than anything else, I continue to be alarmed by the denial of history in America. So I approach these images as counter images to impede the fog of social amnesia that incites our fateful desire to repeat history. We can go to the first slide. So in a work like this image here, a large scale painting that I created in 2021, titled Just a Dream in America. And for me, over the past 22 plus years, boxing has been one of the most revisited subjects that I have tackled and used as these larger than life symbolic metaphors and representations of a means to amplify and echo contemporary society through the arena of boxing. Now, I've never been too interested in the idea of boxing for the sport itself, but I mainly used it because of my interest in trying to portray an identity marker, a means of challenging and confronting the notions of a subject like masculinity in Western culture, past and present. Boxing has a very long historic legacy in America, was banned at one time, but was mostly coined throughout history as the poor man's sport. For many marginalized communities of color today, it still is that one golden ticket, this dream of making it in America, right? In terms of success, in terms of financial reward, in terms of survival. And this is what really draws me back time and time again to the subject like the pugilist. And so in this case, in this specific painting, I was very interested in trying to present it as an homage to the generations that have come before me. When I think about the Chicano movements born out of the civil rights struggle in this country, when I think about the identity of the term Chicano and how that was created, each of these ideas are products of their own of society, being America. And so in this case, I present an image like this in black and white. It's always been an artistic decision for me in the studio to try to find ways to blur that line between what is past and what is present, because in many ways, the past is present. And so one of the challenges that that I take in the studio is finding different methods of trying to layer this very complex dissection of various ways to present an image to you, the viewer. I mean, for me, the image is always key. And so I try to hook you in with a very painstaking, highly detailed rendering technique that seduces the viewer in terms of palette, in terms of contrast and lighting and depth and volume and atmosphere. But for me, the human figure has always been absolutely key. You know, I always interpret the human body to be a moving, walking, breathing memorial. We all embody our own histories, our own memories, our own struggles. But, you know, I've never considered myself a history painter. For me, an image like this speaks, you know, echoes the past, but also begins to tell an unraveling tale about how the past plays out today. And so if you look at, if you pay attention to the design and composition even, and the way that I structure these things, starting from the very base of that canvas where his feet are rooted into this foundation of that ring, right? You feel the weight of those legs, those heavy legs that you know, he can hardly lift up, being so exhausted, and you travel your way up midsection, all the way to the highest levels of this canvas. You see a sort of hierarchical pyramid that in my own imagination plays out a hierarchy of America. Here is the rat race. And here is this individual, a portrait of a young Chicano male, sitting planted on his bench, surrounded but flanked by his two trainers, who are most important key elements for a fighter. Sitting amidst an empty arena, the fight is already past. But you, the viewer, are forced to engage and take part and participate and decide for yourselves, is he so exhausted that he can't even get up and walk back and out of the ring? Or is he still caught in this and wrapped up in this daydream, this vision, this grand vision of making it, right? And so here is this individual caught at this moment in time where you reflect on the impact of his own recognition and awareness that the fight was fixed long ago, right? The match is rigged, but even though he knows that all odds are stacked against him, right? He still is trying to decide whether getting back up is worth it, right? And so it leads you up to the Centennial American banners hovering above the sort of celestial light, right? This is the one light source that's really animating in a very cinematic way the entire image and holding it together. Next image. And so one of the things that really interests me most in the studio is finding various ways to try to tell these tales, right? And so, you know, it's definitely something that I have fun with in regards to trying to confuse the viewer between what is real and what is myth. So an image like this, because it's so cinematically rendered, you know, it's very easy for a viewer to assume that the artist might have actually photographed this scene, you know, is documenting a scene that actually existed in a time and a place in the actual world. But all of these images are painted from imagination, right? And so an image like this titled The Sea, for me, takes on a very, almost a sci-fi quality to it, a very sort of futuristic, as well as historical presence about this individual, you know, this young male who's come to the edge of the world, right? Who's staring over the vast ocean that becomes, again, this sort of metaphor for the obstacles that he must figure out how to cross. Next slide. And then I thought I'd end with give you all a sneak peek of a project that's unfolding in the studio right now titled Supreme. Right here is, I began this image a few hours after the Supreme Court made their big decision several months ago. And so in many ways, it is a documentation, right? It is my way of, like, as I said earlier, testifying and putting down on record what I've experienced. And so an image like this, I'm still chipping away at, but it presents to you these small details about what is most supreme in this land, the ideologies of things like figures like Nelson Rockefeller, right? The wealth in this country, legacy, and faces that are carrying out and playing out these kinds of power structures and systems that affect all of us today in 21st century America. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. And I think now we're going to go back to invite all the artists to come back. Is that correct, Cesáreo?
Yes, there we go. So thank you so much. That was wonderful. Listening to all of you make comments on the present moment and your work within that moment. You all heard one another, and I can't help but think how we have artists here from Chicago, Puerto Rico, California, and Texas. So well represented of this nation. I'd invite the four of you now, please, to based on what you saw, each other's presentations, to join in a conversation among yourselves, asking each other questions, and just kind of getting to know each other and each other's work better here on Zoom while we all listen in.
I have a question for Vincent. I was intrigued. Who's the other person behind the curtains almost peeking? You said Rockefeller was one. Who was the other person? I'm curious.
It was a presidential portrait of James Madison. James Madison, during his term as a politician, never really openly, publicly supported slavery, but refused to sign off on it when he had the chance to. And so to me, it was a perfect fit between the faces that are male dominated, but historically speaking, these are these sort of unbreakable legacies of American power, right? That just get handed down and recycled generation after generation, century after century. Maria, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just commenting. I think it was past and present that you said that the work reflects the past and the present. I always thought it also included a glimpse into the future. So what do you see in the future? What would you like us to see through your work, a glimpse of the future?
Well, you know, if I had to condense it all down to one word, I'd say I see resilience in the past, in the present, and in the future. But I think that reflecting back on all the images, even that we've presented here tonight, that to me is very apparent in everybody's work, right? The act of defiance, resistance, and resilience. I mean, if we think about America, contemporary America, just since 9/11, and all of the various, in many ways, brutal challenges and hardships that this nation has faced, both citizen and non-citizen, as a collective society, resilience should become our national hobby, right? Because it is, Americans are expected to just carry on week after week, you know, whether it's between mass shootings, economic hardship in this nation, COVID, right? But I think the linking factor is that when Americans really need help the most, it seems like that's when the power structures expect Americans to just kind of figure it out on their own and carry on. And so, yeah, you know, unfortunately, I don't see a moment in the near future that resilience is going to no longer be required of us. Maria, I had a question for you. I was curious about where, what has replaced that prison that you documented being torn down?
Yeah, so so far they're in the process of landscaping that area. So, you know, it's pretty significant amount of space that has been you know, basically uncovered or unearthed, I guess I should say. And it's, from my understanding and from what I was told, they're extending what would be talked about as the yard. So possibly space for people to just be outside. I don't know if that's what's actually going to happen, but the last I heard that was the plan. So I'm still in the process of what you saw in the footage was one 60-hour film of just one building, but I have a couple of other cameras going, including one inside of the facility that is documenting the landscaping work happening right now. So it's, you know, a year and a half in, and they're still, you know, doing some turnover of the land, and it'll, you know, we'll see what they do with it. But I also just wanted to pose a question, maybe it kind of connects to your question, Vincent, and a little bit of Consuelo's, is I was thinking a lot about this word extraction, because I think we're talking about it in different ways. Like Consuelo, you know, you talk about it in terms of well, people, but also land. And I think you know, all the other panelists are talking about it in these different ways, like around displacement or extraction of people or resources. But I was wondering how you all what do you offer in replace of that through your practice, through your work, or through your study, or through your research? You know, and it's a question I'm always asking myself, is like, how do I both critique a system, but then not offer a solution necessarily, but sort of offer something in replacement of that brutality or that violence or that extraction? So I was wondering if maybe if that resonates with anybody, if anybody wants to
Definitely
respond to that.
I think that like Vincent said, the resistance is here, but congruently with resistance, I offer, let's celebrate. Let's make these things beautiful. Let's celebrate that we're still here, that we're still alive, that we still have artists that can convey some of these issues to the bigger masses. There's so much to celebrate. The sun comes up. Let's not forget that. And I feel that that's what I would like for the viewers to see. As you see the suffering of the birds, as you see the tearing apart of the land, it's still beautiful, you know, and we can't lose sight of how I think it was the Netzahualcoyo. We're here to create flowers and song. So if we're going to extract anything from ourselves as artists, flowers and songs, but give them their reality, like Vincent really expressed it well, the reality of we got to resist, we got to survive, and we still got to keep on getting in that ring. And don't forget that wonderful light at the very top that Vincent put there.
I agree with that exactly, Consuelo. You know, for me, it's like Sylvia briefly mentioned in my quote earlier. You know, I don't fool myself into thinking that a picture can change the world, but my own miniature revolution, my way of revolting is by offering moments of silence and clarity in times of immense distortion and chaos. And that's it. That's my small offering to the world. And to me, that's something, because I remember, you know, looking at the artists that came before me, like Luis Jimenez, John Valadez, Kathy Vargas, and that's exactly what they did for me as a youngster. They gave me the perseverance and the hope and the strength to follow in their footsteps, so that I could try to make the world a little bit better than the way that I found it when I entered. And so, you know, it's something, it counts for a lot, and that's what gives us, that's what makes us a very strong people and a very strong community in the end.
There's a question for, it's a question, I think, of aguante, you know, the term to keep on, keeping on. And how can you not keep on when we stand on these shoulders of these giants that you just mentioned and many others? Like there is no, I always would write in my journals, this way up, an arrow pointing up. There's no other way when you're way at the bottom. You got to go up, you know, you don't have to, you can stay there, but there's a way up. Let's look up and see where the heck can we go from here. Let's not get lost in the, don't collapse into the moment. Let's move time forward. And I think that's our power as artists. And I think that's why I love the arts, because it's like I tell people, it's like coming to, the artist brings the viewer to the cliff. A great artwork makes you jump. So if we can make that viewer leap into the light that you're showing us, leap into the celebrity that they were was showing us with their food. That's you know, that's light, sharing food. Maria sharing the pain and angst of others, and that others realize we're here, we're sharing. There's people that are noticing and putting it up front that we're hurting. That's so wonderful. That's so powerful. So if we could move, you know, what did the one say? If you have the pebble, you have the mountain. If we move one person, we moved a mountain. That's our power. That's what we got to keep doing.
Anybody want to maybe talk a little bit about ideas, big ideas for the future? Like it's something that you have in mind that maybe you're just in a very, very pre-stage of embarking on in the studio?
Oh my gosh. Well, I could talk forever, but I just 2 days ago, I got the realization. I was looking at the image of the widest tree in the world, which I saw in person, was in Oaxaca. It's like huge, it's like, you know, just the widest tree in the world. And I live over here in the coast of the California northern, where the redwoods are tall. And my question to myself is, okay, in the redwoods, they live off the fog. There's no more fog in Mendocino. It's just like central Southern California. And how long will those How long will those redwoods survive? How can I talk about the trees? How can I interweave the widest tree in the world with the tallest tree in the world? That just happened 2 days ago. That's 3 months ago. I saw, how does undocumented stars from the Canton, what if they crash into the stripes of the flag because they're undocumented? Stuff, those are a couple of my ideas. The other one is, how do I make people look at this and realize how tiny we are by presenting to them the cartwheel galaxy that we just explored, that we just discovered? Those three all at once, yo, 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 and I'm going, I'm only one. I don't know how what's gonna go on next. I have my projects already figured out through next spring. And right now, these three ideas and maybe a couple others are positioning themselves. So I don't know. I just know that we have, like we were speaking, this gift. What is it that I want to say thank you as I'm leaving this world? I'm getting on in years. My sand clock is running low. What I want to say thanks to all those that sustain me. The sun, already done her, the celestial, the chile, the foods, the land, the birds. That's my project right now, is to say thank you and gracias to all these wonderful earth elements that help me and my people and all people survive as humans. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just like, okay, I'm a weaver. I make 2 or 3 pieces a year. I've got like 10 more years. So I got like 30 more masterpieces. That's not very much. That's where I'm dying to get back to my studio and keep on, because, you know, we sleep for 1/3 of our lives.
Yeah.
Those 10 years, I'm going to be asleep 3 or 4. That means only 7. That means only 3 or 4 will go to the 3 or 4 will go to the mundane. The remaining 3 or 4 will go into art. That's not a lot of time in 10 years. That goes through my head, folks. You got to have fun where you got to have fun. And if the fun is in the mundane, then so be it. But it's more fun in the studio with my hilos. Like thousands of years have gone by, spinning, dyeing, stitching, weaving. I feel timeless. That's in my future. I can talk forever, but I want to hear other voices. I think that's somebody's phone.
Maria, I couldn't help but think about when you were speaking and showing the images. I'm not sure if you have ever done any reading on the Haymarket riot in Chicago. I think in the pre-19, like even before 1920, I think this occurred. But it's a really amazing sequence of really almost widely forgotten, unknown American history, rarely talked about in regards to the war on labor in this country. But as I'm reading so much about this event that occurred, gives almost a premonition about policing in this country and mass incarceration, right? And how big business ties in, you know, the real owners of this country, how agents like mass incarceration really are, really play themselves out for the wealthy, for the wealth of this country, right? And so if you haven't come across the subject, it's really a pretty amazing, interesting topic to read about. And there's a few good resources that exist out there. There's not much, but it's pretty astonishing. It's, you know, when you think about like this occurring in 1914, 1913, fast forward on, you know, over 100 years in this country, and really not very much has changed in respects to police brutality and the for-profit prison system.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. It makes me think about Well, a couple of things, the ways that, you know, Angola prison, for example, is on a former slave plantation. And it makes me think about something that's more specific to the state of Illinois, but also in other states across the country, which is getting rid of cash bail, which is clearly, you know, a system that has been in place for a long time that you know, enables the wealthier population to be able to get out of jails. They can await trial in their own home, but the people that can't afford it then are stuck in limbo inside jails and pre-detention. So I think that absolutely what you're talking about kind of hits different notes, and I think about like the work of people like Mariam Kaba or like Ruth Wilson Gilmore and all these other folks that have been, or Angela Davis, who've been talking about this for a long time. And you know, the way they talk about racial capitalism and you know, the ways that we have created these systems in place that are obviously connected to all these other parts of our lived experience, whether that connects to like our education system, our social system, our economic system, and the way all of these things are tied together. They're not completely you know, they're not separate. They're all tied together. They're all connected, and that we have to find ways of getting to the like root of these issues and why we have the carceral system that we have, and which again, like I said before, connects to you know, the lack of kind of caring social welfare. And so I think a lot about that even in my own life as somebody who's in the process of kind of abolition process, and like how do I think about abolition in my role as a parent, as a mother, in my role as a community member, in my role as a teacher in an art school or in the community. Like I want to think about how that can play a role in all aspects of my life. And that's sort of, it's challenging, but it's really important to me to kind of think about how to, you know, the way we're thinking about land and ecosystem, the way you talked about that, you know, beyond our own private lives, but, you know, the way it connects to others and the way we connect in community. So.
You know, we're about ready to go into the larger Q&A, but before we do that, mulowayi, me gustaría preguntarte a ti de tus próximos pasos, ¿no? A dónde va.
But I would like to ask you, mulowayi, about your next steps. Where is your art going? What do you think is gonna? What are you going to be working on the next year and in the future?
¿Me escuchó o no? Mulowayi? I'm not.
Mulowayi type no escucho nada in the chat.
I see that. Okay, so a little technical difficulty there then. Okay. Well, I guess maybe it's we'll try to fix that if we can. And I don't know if the interpreter, if she can hear. No, she probably can't hear anybody then. Mary, should we open it up to the larger Q&A then?
Sure. So we have a couple of questions. The first question that we have that's geared toward all of the artists is from Terry Rodriguez. And Terry writes, "Hello, everyone. Thank you all for sharing your incredible talents within creative awareness. What is one of the most important immediate social awareness topics that each of you feel could inspire a collective shift of human positivity within the next 2 years?" And I'm sorry, I mispronounced the name. This is from Renee Rodriguez, in fact. So I'll post this to the group and hopefully we can figure out audio while our other participants, you know, chime in.
I think for me, I would like to have everyone recognize the importance of our time, how we're in a shifting moment with our policies and with people and with land. But at the same time, I don't want to sound like Chicken Little. You read Hammurabi, and he was complaining about the same issues, and that's back in Mesopotamia, that we have now. He was bemoaning the corrupt priests, the young people who don't really pay attention, the politicians who are up for themselves. So I feel like as artists, we have 80, 90 years to produce these moments of potential insights for our fellow man. And I think as long as we create art and share the art, that brings people together, high and low. You know, all kinds of people, if you can engage them to view, to create art, create something that is flowers and song based. That's how I see the future. As long as we can sustain that moment of aha or wow, we're winning. It'll be another good spin around the sun.
And maybe let's try one more time. Mulowayi, ahora sí escuchas bien? ¿O no? Sí.
Sí, escucho.
Perfecto. Mire, la pregunta fue sobre su trabajo en el futuro. ¿Qué piensa que van a ser los próximos pasos? ¿Qué viene en su trabajo el año que viene o en los próximos años? ¿Qué piensas?
Estaba enfocada en el momento
I was
presente.
focused in the present time, but I will do the exercise. Yes, for this next year, I have some projects focused more in filming. I think we are in a moment where we want to explore these media as a way of expand our work and also to connect with others. So a little of that, we are very focused on continuing working on what we are doing in our community in San Antonio through the project Parcerías Afro-Caribeñas, that is an organization we founded in 2019 together with a group of marvelous women from our community. And this project takes a lot of work, enough to be very busy next year. But I think now it is a moment of a lot of reflection, of taking things more pausely, because the past few years were very intense. So it is this right now.
Gracias. Are there any other questions that we want to answer from the Q&A, Mary?
Yes, we've had a few other questions come in. You know, I'll start with another question that's geared toward all of our panelists. This is from an anonymous attendee who said, I'd love to know the path that all of the artists took that got them to the path they are on now. As a young artist, it can be difficult to take the next step and even know who to connect with. Any tips would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, here's how I started. I thought, oh, artists, they paint and sculpt. Okay, but I like my embroidery. So I go to school, college, and I want to learn how to paint and sculpt. But I'm really intrigued with the Mexican folk art of the textile. So there I am at a junior going, why is this referred to as folk and craft? Why isn't it art? Vocus did ceramics. They're talking about Ansel Adams' photography as art. Vocus is a ceramicist, but he broke into the art world. Why not thread? Oh, it's decorative. Oh, it's women's work. Okay. Well, then, Consuelo, You crossed that Mexican-US border many times successfully. Why don't you cross this border? Cross from the merge together art and craft. Put it together with a thread. That's what inspired me. From then on, once I knew my path, well, what I had to do is break down that wall between craft and art. It was easy. So easy. The hardest was crossing that border wall with my dad. That was hard. But to break down the wall, cross that border from craft to art, soups. It just took 10 years. That's okay. It took 2-3 degrees, little pieces of paper. That's okay. That's what inspired me. And then to look at all the incredible thread work from China, from the Northern Europe, from Africa. I mean, this incredible, the Americas. I felt empowered. It's like I have all those anonymous women behind me. And there's so many issues. There's so many things to talk about. But I could only talk about what angst me all my life. And it was crossing that stupid border between England and Spain.
More advice?
You know, for me, probably one of the most important leaps that I took early on was doing everything that I could to get out of Texas, right? Because I grew up in Texas. It was the world that I knew, and so once I finished high school, I knew the both the best and the most terrifying thing I could do as a young artist was insert myself in an entirely new foreign environment where I was going to be challenged on a daily basis, and I was going to be pushed beyond my own comfort zones. And so for artists who are trying to seek out their own path, right, and in finding their own voice, I would say that probably one of the most important lessons that any artist can have is in trying to develop your own methods of learning to take risks. Risks as an artist are probably one of the most important habits that you can develop, because in taking risks, you'll learn to not only listen to, but to trust your own artistic intuition, right? And the goal for any artist should always be to learn to get out of the driver's seat and get in the back seat and let this thing that is more powerful and more bigger than you become, take full control of that steering wheel, right? Now think about that. Like, think about if you actually got in the back seat and allowed this thing to drive itself. That's a pretty terrifying idea, because it could easily run you off the cliff, right? But that's the exciting part of it all, is not knowing where you're going to end up. And I think that for me, to the day that I die, that'll be the thing that is front and center every time that I walk into that studio.
Can I challenge that a little bit? Because I think you're right on, except it's ourselves. Remember, the greatest lesson of all the commandments was know thyself. So an artist has to know who he is. What doesn't matter what part of the car you're in, you're that car. And you've got to trust that car to do what it's going to do.
Sure. Yeah, I like that.
That's what I liked about art. Is that I always thought of myself as me and myself and I. I love basketry, I love stitching, I love weaving. There's three of us. But what's more important than the three of us? It's what we want to affect, what we want to change. So if all three of us get into that moment of how we're doing the change and in the studio, Wes, that's the power of strength, right? I mean, that's the nexus of who we are as artists. To be in that spot that you were talking about, the back seat, the front seat, doesn't matter. It's the car. And not only it's the car, where's that car going to? That's the mystery. For me, when you ask me, what are we going to do, Cesáreo, on the next? Well, that's the mystery. The car is going. It's already on my path. It's already like going downhill really coolly into the future. But in the beginning, as you're starting to get to know the car, it is a struggle. Who's driving this car? Form, content, context, which one? And then you realize it's all of them. So now, where are we going? Where do you want to take the audience? That's the challenge.
Mulowayi, consejos para artistas jóvenes en cómo encontrar sus caminos.
Consejos.
Some tips. Well, as an artist that didn't formally studied art and who believes in connecting with oneself and to find the truth, the dialogue with ourselves, and to go without caring about judgment from other people of our work, of our ideas. I think that you need to challenge your fears and to go for it. In the world of art, in a space where there are so many demands for artists, I think the idea is go for it, even when you feel that your idea is not enough, but if it isn't enough for you, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I just maybe I want to add to what Mulowayi just said, because I also teach in an art school, and I mean, something that has helped me over the years, or especially as a very young artist, was growing up in Chicago and having these amazing artists who let me hang out with them, doing murals, or invited me into their house or the studio and let me pick up a brush and, do a little touch up for them or something. There was really a kind of generosity that they shared with me. And I think a lot about how I can return that generosity, with younger artists. And in my teaching, I think a lot about how often in the art academy, there is one dominant narrative that continues to live on, which is, the sort of epitome of Western arts, the gallery museum system. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but I like to sort of talk about different ways of being an artist, that there is not one way of being an artist. And I think, like, in some ways we've all touched on that, and that we can look at examples of people who are doing amazing, radical, artistic work that exists in different kinds of spaces, that engages different kinds of people, and that builds different kinds of communities, and they don't have to all look the same. And I think that's just a lesson that I try to give to younger artists, because I hope that they can create those pathways for other artists, so that these dominant narratives are not the singular kind of oppressive narrative that I think we've all been I feel like existing in for so long.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you all for this wonderful, interesting, compelling, and exciting and panel discussion. On behalf of the US Latinx Art Forum, Mexic-Arte Museum, and the National Museum of Mexican Art, we'd like to thank you for participating in this national conversation. The present moment is always in flux and in great need of our attention, our concern, and our care. No social systems can exist without intentional maintenance, and we are here this evening believe that it is our most creative members of the community, the artists, who can often draw attention to these areas of need, imagine brand new directions, and signal solutions for tomorrow. Buenas noches. Good night.